In the world of anime, there is a tradition of anthropomorphism. Cats, dogs, horses, and now even spiders. They've all been humanized and, subsequently waifued. But of all things to fixate upon, it is modern warships that have filled this genre most successfully, with a whole host of mobile gacha games and partnerships with World of Warships. It would shock most regular people and even a few anime fans to know that there is not one, but 3 anime with this very theme. Kantai Collection and Arpeggio of Blue Steel led the way into this type of show, but the absolute queen, the master of this domain, the top of this niche is without a doubt Azur Lane, and the contest is not even close. So I'm going to do a series on this channel telling the stories of the real-life counterparts of all the ship girls in Azur Lane, and as voted by you, the first on the list is Prinz Eugen. Known in the show as the snarky and sassy leader of Ironblood's mission to the Sakura Empire, she is ferocious in battle, deviously clever, and as we have seen in the Slice of Life series Azur Lane Slow Ahead, incredibly horny, giving off very strong ara vibes, which is just how we like it on this channel. But due to her most notable appearance being alongside Germany's most famous battleship, the ship that forms this waifu's namesake is often left as an afterthought, rather than a glamorous, worthy co-star. I'm here to correct the record. And so, let us hear the story of the Admiral Hipper-class battlecruiser, Prinz Eugen. After the major naval powers of the world signed the Washington Naval Treaty, there was a movement around the world to get the most bang for buck out of a restricted tonnage limit. Japan coped with this problem by building aircraft carriers while secretly planning something big. The US got around it by building their own carriers, building destroyers, and support ships. Italy got around it by building battle cruisers and submarines. France got around it by being so broke they modernized their older stuff instead, and the British by ignoring the rules and doing whatever the fuck they wanted because we rules the waves and shit, etc., etc. But in the case of the newly born Nazi Germany, this situation was doubly problematic as not only are the global naval treaties a blocker to progress, but the Treaty of Versailles as well. So the natural course of action for our favourite Austrian house painter was to secretly scrap all international treaties and follow the British example of doing whatever the fuck he wants. Which led to Admiral Raeder, Commander-in-Chief of the Kriegsmarine, to put in a request for a new building program. The program's name was the Z-Plan.
Oh, it's evil. It's diabolical. This Plan Z can't possibly fail!
Raeder essentially wanted to build a large fleet of battlecruisers, or pocket battleships as they were known, with a contingent of heavy capital ships to back them up. The most famous of these being the Bismarck and the Tirpitz. There were also plans for super battleships, much like the Yamato, known as the H-class battleships, as well as aircraft carriers, and a large fleet of light and fast ships like destroyers and torpedo boats. All in all, there were 240 vessels slated to be built for the Kriegsmarine surface fleet. Now, personally, I'm not a naval genius, but part of me thinks, just maybe, if you're a semi-landlocked nation with economic problems and a lack of access to raw materials and special metals, relying on a surface fleet to fight a war with the British Empire and later the United States, which is what this plan was ostensibly designed to do, seems a bit unwise. But our spirited Austrian bohemian seemed to be perfectly happy with this plan, probably because battleships looked good on the newsreels, and so he signed off on its beginning. Shh. Can you hear that? If you listen closely in the distance, you can hear a wild Admiral Durnett screaming hysterically into the void. His tears are currently flooding the Kiel Canal. Can you hear it? Anyway, the building of these surface ships began in earnest, with the Deutschland-class cruisers being the first to arrive, Admiral Graf Spee being the most famous of these. And then Scharnhorst and Gneisenauer joined the Kriegsmarine, bringing what were the most two modern battleships in the world at the time into the German surface fleet. And it is here in 1936 at the Germania Werft shipyard in Kiel that the story begins, as Prinz Eugen's hull was laid down and construction started. Weighing in at 19,050 tons, measuring 681 feet long, and powered by 3 steam turbines propelling her at a blistering 32 knots, Prinz Eugen was a monster of a cruiser. Her bust size in Azur Lane is most likely referencing this fact, as this girl is thick. At least in relation to the other ships of the cruiser class. Most other cruisers having maybe 1.5 to 2 inches of armour, Prinz Eugen came in with 3 inches of hardened Krupp steel, 4 twin sets of 8-inch guns, 12 torpedo tubes, and enough secondary armament to outfit one of the Wehrmacht's panzer battalions. In 1938, Prinz Eugen was launched into the Kiel Canal with the captain of the old Prinz Eugen, Hungarian leader Admiral Miklas Horthy, and the infamous mustachioed art school reject in attendance. The outfitting process took 2 more years. So, it's 1940, and by this time Germany was at war and in need of ships for the upcoming invasion of the so-called weak and helpless, defenceless Britain. And as luck would have it, at the end of June 1940, she was ready to be commissioned, and so on July the 1st, she... What's that? You guys hear that? Oh shit! And as luck would have it, thanks to Mr. Meyer, the venerable Reichsmarschall Goering's incredibly effective air defense, Prinz Eugen would be ready for commissioning on August the 1st, 1940. And so she began her sea trials, practicing her gunnery and making sure everything was ready for her first mission, and then she hit a mine. Hello! Oh. Because the RAF regularly mined the Kiel Canal like complete assholes. But after that was fixed, she was ready. And Admiral Raeder had a plan for her. In fact, it would be the second most ballsy move the Kriegsmarine would ever pull with their surface fleet. So while Prinz Eugen was gallivanting around the Baltic on her sea trials, she had been accompanied by another ship. A ship so important that Prinz Eugen had been given a news crew from the Reich's propaganda ministry on orders of the Rat Man himself to document her in action. Most of you already know who this ship was, but to those who don't, Prinz Eugen's sailing partner was the Bismarck. She is most definitely going to get her own video at some point, but suffice to say she was and still is an awe-inspiring sight. And her main mission was to break through the Royal Navy blockade of the North Sea, pass through the Denmark Strait, and enter the western approaches to begin commerce raiding. If a battleship of Bismarck's speed and firepower was able to get among the convoys, the damage that could be inflicted would be absolutely biblical in scale, perhaps even fatal to the United Kingdom's war effort. This meant that the Royal Navy would throw everything at her, and thus she needed an escort. Prinz Eugen was chosen to be that escort. And so together the two ships trained and trained, preparing for the day that they would sally forth to meet the enemy. And that day arrived on the 21st of May, 1941, with Captain Helmuth Brinkmann in command of Prinz Eugen and Admiral Lutjens in command of the task force. The two warships sailed to Norway in preparation for their sortie into the Atlantic. They were then spotted by RAF recon Spitfires, but the following bombers failed to hit their target. The fight, ladies and gentlemen, was now on. And so Prinz Eugen and Bismarck sortied forward into the Denmark Strait, their radar scanning ahead constantly, alert to the danger that the British knew they were coming. This was confirmed when Prinz Eugen's sensor teams reported screw noise and a radar signature from nearby. This was the cruiser HMS Suffolk, who had begun monitoring the ships thinking they were a cruiser force patrolling from Trondheim. When they had gotten closer, however, the team on board had a collective "oh shit" moment, reported the position of Bismarck and Prinz Eugen, and then ran like hell to the edge of detection range. The cat was indeed now out of the bag, and the next morning, 2 ships were detected ahead of the group. Big ships. Fast ones, too. Their smoke trails were impressive, and they were headed straight towards the 2 German ships. The lookouts finally got a visual at 5:50 AM on May 24th and identified the battleship HMS Prince of Wales. But more disconcertingly, they also spotted the Royal Navy flagship, the pride of the fleet who had once toured the Empire between the wars, HMS Hood. Hood immediately opened fire at Prinz Eugen, which she had mistaken for Bismarck as Eugen had taken the lead in the convoy, missing her shots by a considerable distance. One problem facing the Royal Navy ships was that they had miscalculated their intercept and so by accident they had not led the formation enough, and now the Germans were crossing the T in front of them. This meant the British could only fire their forward batteries. Prinz Eugen and Bismarck, however, could fire all of their guns in response, and this they did. Both Prinz Eugen and Bismarck focused on Hood, who was now bearing down trying to close the range. Her wooden deck was unarmoured and vulnerable to arcing long-range fire. However, with her higher muzzle velocity and faster reload, Prinz Eugen's gunners were slinging shells at Hood in a considerable amount of volume. And only a minute after combat had commenced, Prinz Eugen scored a hit on the Hood's deck, starting a fire near a AAA position causing secondary explosions. With first blood struck, Prinz Eugen was ordered to drop behind Bismarck for both their safety and to protect the rear from the British cruisers now hauling ass up behind them. All the while, Prinz Eugen was flinging shells at Prince of Wales, while Bismarck focused on Hood. The result is famous, as you all know. Bismarck scored a hit on Hood's magazine, causing one of the worst naval disasters in human history. Hood simply evaporated, splitting in half and sinking almost immediately. Of her ship's complement of 1,413, only 3 men survived. With the pride of the Royal Navy and Azur Lane's best girl now sinking to the bottom of the Atlantic, Prince of Wales retaliated by knocking out Bismarck's forward fuel tanks. However, with her guns faulty, half her bridge crew killed by a lucky shot, and a severe hit below the waterline, Prince of Wales was forced to withdraw. With the battle over, Prinz Eugen surveyed the damage to Bismarck and reported it to Lutyens. It wasn't looking good for Bismarck. She needed repairs and she would have to head for France. But Prinz Eugen, despite being short of fuel, was still fully operational, and so orders came down for her to break away from Bismarck and head out to the open sea. Once she reaches the open sea, separate from the formation, she could meet up with a replenishment tanker safely away from the Royal Navy. But first she had to get away from the ships following Bismarck. Admiral Lutyens had a solution to this. Late in the evening, with weather worsening, Bismarck turned about and started heading towards the British cruisers chasing them. Due to the rain and descending fog, the cruisers were blissfully unaware, until up ahead of them, a dark shape loomed out of the gloom. All I'm going to say is I would hate to be the guy on laundry duty that week. But on the other hand, the latrine cleaner's got a day off. The deck would have smelt a bit, though. Bismarck fired on the cruisers while Prinz Eugen broke away, making good her escape. Prinz Eugen met up with her supply ship and began refueling, but during this process, it was revealed that her engines were suffering severe defects and maybe even shock damage from the previous battle. What's worse was her boilers and one of her steam turbines were slowly becoming inoperable. It was decided she would have to return to Brest in France for repairs alongside the Bismarck. She would then meet up with the aforementioned Bismarck, Scharnhorst and Gneisenau to form a massive flotilla which they could then use to begin commerce raiding again. However, if Captain Brinkman was having a bad day already, it was about to get worse, as he received the following signal from Bismarck broadcast across fleet channels. Steering inoperable, we will fight to the last shell. Long live der Führer. And so, while Prinz Eugen slowly glided towards Brest with Condor patrol aircraft above her and U-boats below, Bismarck's shattered, lifeless hulk came to rest at the bottom of the Atlantic. So, Prinz Eugen, with her engines broke, her honorary sister ships sunk, her crew demoralised, and basically everything having gone to shit, she limps into port at Brest on June 1st, 1941, and is immediately put into dry dock. Repair crews feverishly work on her to get her propulsion gear repaired, while the crew rests from their ordeal. Let's be honest, it was a long week. But now, in the safety of Brest Harbour, she could begin to prepare for the long battles ahead, with Scharnhorst, Gneisenau, and the protection of both a comprehensive ground defence installation with AAA guns everywhere and frontline Luftwaffe fighter units. Her position was nigh on impregnable. There is no possible way the British could stop this almighty flotilla should it... Oh, for fuck's sake! Right, that's it. I'm fucking done with the RAF ruining my script. Which, funnily enough, is exactly what Raeder and Dönitz said. The constant air raids on French Kriegsmarine installations had prompted the construction of heavily armoured U-boat pens. However, constructing armoured shelters to cover entire port installations was beyond even the fabled German Kraut space magic.
You utter fool! German science is the finest in the world!
And as such, all three of the Kriegsmarine's main capital ships on the French coast were constantly being prevented from sortying due to bomb damage. Prinz Eugen took multiple hits, including one serious one, crippling the ship's command centre and fire control system, killing 40 of the ship's company in the process. This state of affairs continued into 1942, with all three of these so-called seriously dangerous battleships having achieved basically nothing, except for Scharnhorst and Gneisenau sinking the carrier Glorious during the invasion of Norway, a ship the Royal Navy quickly replaced within 6 months, with newly commissioned carriers coming online. But the situation was now getting tenuous for Europe's biggest anti-Semitic hipster, as his offensive against the Soviet Union had failed to destroy the Red Army, which was now, much to the concern of the OKW, winning battles and using tanks and aircraft which were somehow superior to their own. How these so-called subhuman communists were doing this, no one was quite sure. But while the aforementioned superior combat equipment was mostly Soviet-made, half the supply of food and support equipment was coming from the Western Allies via the Lend-Lease program. And the primary route for these convoys was via the northern passage to Archangel near Murmansk. Cutting this supply route to the Soviets would deal a serious blow to their logistics system, and may even help end the siege of Leningrad, which would free up a large contingent of Wehrmacht divisions to join the upcoming southern offensive towards Stalingrad and the Caucasian oil fields. So, remember when I mentioned the second most ballsy move the Kriegsmarine did? You ready to hear the first? Having been given orders by the Corporal cum King, no, I'm not going to use that fuckwit's name, The planning team at the Oberkommando Marine came up with an operation so insane that Admiral Raeder lost his proverbial shit. You see, they were faced with a dilemma. The battleship flotilla couldn't sail via the Denmark Strait. Fuel would be a problem, not to mention the damage they'd continuously sustained, and that meant sailing past RAF Coastal Command and the British Home Fleet based at Scapa Flow. Supporting Italy wasn't an option either, as getting past Gibraltar would be suicidal, seeing as Force H and the Med Fleet outnumber them with capital ships at a rate of 10-1. So, unable to go west because you hit America, and let's be real, that's a really bad idea. South is out because, again, have to go past Gibraltar, and north won't work either. That leaves one route. Straight up the motherfucking English Channel. Right past Royal Navy HQ at Portsmouth, right past RAF fighter, coastal and bomber commands and the fleet air arm, and even the British Army anti-ship batteries set up to repel the prospected invasion in 1940. Now this appears suicidal as well, but when you consider the situation, you need to factor in one important man. Adolf Galland, General of the Luftwaffe Fighter Force, veteran of Spain, France, the Battle of Britain and the defense of the Reich. He came up with an absolutely incredible operational concept, which still stands today as an example of what combined arms air operations can achieve. On the evening of February 11th, the 3 German ships set off from Brest to Norway, straight up the English Channel. And by the morning of February 12th, they had entered the Channel proper, passing Cherbourg at 0600, picking up an escort force of torpedo boats and destroyers along the way. It was here that Galland's planning came into effect. Before setting sail, Galland had sent operations officers from the main Luftwaffe fighter squadrons in France, who had boarded each of the ships, giving them direct communications with the pilots above. While it seems normal now, on-call close air support was absolutely revolutionary at the time. It had been used before during the Blitzkrieg campaigns, but this was the first time an entire operation was coordinated from frontline teams with close air controllers, with Galland himself flying sorties with Jagdgeschwader 26. This gave them flexibility that the Allies would only be able to replicate 2 years later with the Tactical Air Force concept. The initial fighter sweeps came in at mast height, below the radar on the south coast of England. While this was happening, Luftwaffe bomber squadrons mounted large-scale raids on the south coast, not with bombs, but with chaff, an idea they stole from RAF Bomber Command. With their radar jammed, the British knew something was up, and soon the German ships were spotted. Immediately, orders went out. Churchill essentially reacted in the way I would expect him to react. He acted like he was from that scene in The Last Jedi.
I want every gun we have to fire on that man.
However, the air offences against the group were thrown back by German fighter cover. It was ferocious, absolutely brutal. The few that did make it past the defensive screen were faced with 3 ships armed with radar-directed AAA, in bad weather, forced to fly low at close range. No hits were scored on any of the ships for loss of 42 aircraft. The Luftwaffe lost 22, and only 7 of those were fighters, which, however way you cut it, is 2-1 in raw numbers and 6-1 in real terms. The Royal Navy had attempted to halt the formation with a destroyer screen, which went about as well as you could expect, sending destroyers up against cruisers and battleships. Prinz Eugen scored her first victory of the war, crippling the destroyer HMS Worcester, leaving her dead in the water, while the capital ships in their MTB screen forced off the other 5 ships in the group. By the end of the day, they'd made it through the Straits of Dover and into the beginning of the North Sea. And then Scharnhorst hit a mine. Well, at least Gneisenau made it.
Minen!
Oh. Well, they are battleships, they can walk it off. Prinz Eugen, meanwhile, sailed on to Norway, and safety.
Torpedo!
Alarm! Fucking really? Yep. Upon making it to Norway, Prinz Eugen was hit in the stern by a torpedo fired from HMS Trident, killing 50 crew and disabling her propulsion system yet again. This resulted in her needing a tow to a dry dock in Lotfjord. Well, at least we made it to Norway. We made it past the RAF and the Royal Navy. I mean, besides at the end there. I mean, we took some damage. Oh, we're safe now. Shit can't get any worse. Alright, that's it. Fuck you, Arthur Harris. I'm sick of your shit. I never thought I'd say this voluntarily, but I'm going to the Eastern Front. Fuck y'all, I'm out. Okay, that's better. It's taken 2 years, but now Prinz Eugen is finally repaired, combat capable, and most importantly, out of RAF range. It's now June 1944, and France has developed an Anglo-American infestation. But that, strangely enough, is the least of Germany's problems, because coming from the east is a veritable steamroller of men and machines. Marching towards the Baltic coast in order to trap Army Group North in Estonia and Latvia, the Red Army Baltic Front has now launched multiple offensive operations. In order to prevent this from succeeding, all Kriegsmarine assets were diverted to provide fire support and evacuation capability to German units retreating along the coastline of the Baltics. Throughout the second half of 1944, Prinz Eugen fired over 2,000 main gun rounds in support of the Wehrmacht, and proved crucial in repelling numerous Soviet offensive operations along the coast, as well as ensuring the success of any local counterattacks that could be mounted. However, this extensive use of her main batteries meant that the barrels had to be changed on her main battery, and thus a return to base was required. While on the way back to the port of Gotenhafen, a heavy fog bank blanketed the Baltic Sea, and during this low visibility, Prinz Eugen rammed the cruiser Leipzig amidships, which nearly cut the smaller ship in half. But the damage to Prinz Eugen wasn't too severe, and so upon reaching port, repairs began alongside the barrel changes to her guns. This was completed quickly, and with this done, she set sail again in January of 1945 to help stall the Soviet advance into East Prussia. The towns leading into Königsberg were mounting a desperate defense as the Soviet juggernaut moved around them, heading towards Berlin, cutting Prussia off from the rest of Germany. Prinz Eugen sailed along the coast supporting German troops, raining fire down on Soviet forces in Danzig, the approaches to Gotenhafen, Hela, and Königsberg itself. In this short time frame, Prinz Eugen expended 2,025 main gun rounds and 2,448 secondary battery rounds, which, when one considers Germany's ammo shortage and the size of each shell, is an impressive amount of firepower. However, with said ammo shortage becoming a chronic issue and the end of the war no longer in doubt, Prinz Eugen and her shield sister, the pocket battleship Lutzow, sailed west to the port of Swinemünde in preparation for surrender to the Western Allies. Well, look, we're going to have to surrender to the Royal Navy, but I'm sure they're going to be magnanimous in victory. I mean, we'd make a great war prize. It's not like they'd take out any serious amount of retribution. You know what? I don't fucking care anymore. Wow. Huh. We didn't get hit. That's amazing. Those were late war anti-ship Lancasters. They'd have Norden bomb sights and tallboy bombs. It's a miracle we're still alive, actually. Oh, you know, I wasn't thinking after the amount of luck we've had with air raids, I didn't think we'd make it. How'd Lutzo go? Oh. Ugh. Ugh. Yeah. Oh, hey, look at that. War's over. Sick. So now the war has ended, and Prince Eugen sails to Copenhagen for the express purpose of surrendering to the Royal Navy, which she does. However, given how much is going on at this point regards Operation Paperclip and Soviet tech hunters, both the US and the USSR also lay claim to the ship as a war prize. So, they pick who gets to keep it in the simplest way possible. They draw straws to determine who gets what. No, I am not kidding. The US Navy won the draw, and so US officers and NCOs boarded the ship with orders to sail it to Boston. The German crew were told that they were prisoners on parole, and as such they were to sail the ship there for them. Given that they received US food and supplies, this was not an issue, and so on the 22nd of January 1946, Prince Eugen docked in Boston Harbor to be dissected by the US Navy's R&D department. The ship was pulled apart at the seams, with special attention paid to the sensor systems, the fire control system, and the propulsion systems, all of which were incredibly advanced even by 1945 standards. But after the German crew had returned to Germany, the research fell apart because, as is the case with most German engineering projects, once the Kraut space magicians weren't there, their spells wore off. Prince Eugen's propulsion system suffered critical existence failure in a series of violent, unscheduled engine disassemblies, leaving her dead in the water. And so, she was towed away for scrap to be melted down for steel, sold to the highest bidder. Hang on a minute. This scrapyard is quite the distance from Boston. Isn't there like a Navy breaker yard in Norfolk, Virginia? Why the fuck are we all the way over here? It's been what, 25 days? We even went through the Panama Canal. Oh hey, check it out. Are those Japanese battleships? That's cool. Is that the Haruna? Huh. No, wait, Hiei, maybe. I don't know, it doesn't matter. Wait a minute. Why are they all docked in an atoll? What are they all doing out here anyway? What's the name of this place? Bikini? What, like the swimsuit? Oh. Yep. Prince Eugen was used in the nuclear tests at Bikini Atoll, Operation Crossroads, and it is here that she would meet her fate. She would, amazingly enough, survive all of the nuclear tests and be towed to Kwajalein for salvage, but the radiation contamination and the damage suffered to the hull was too severe. Prince Eugen finally broke. She capsized and sank in shallow waters. This is a photo of her today. Her keel is still visible above the water, still in the same place where she was left. Her propeller is in a naval memorial in Germany, while the fuel in her bunkers has been steadily pumped out by the US Navy in order to preserve the local marine wildlife. But ultimately, this is Prince Eugen's final resting place. Despite the regime which she served, this ship had an incredible story. It was a desperate story, a story of survival. She didn't deserve to end up this way. But her story ends like all of our stories end eventually. Well, that's it, guys. That is the story of Prince Eugen. More of these coming soon, as with Strike Witch's biographies as well. These take a while to make, so please be patient. More videos coming soon with my editor Calliope in attendance. You guys have a great day. Thanks for watching. See you next time.